Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the live stream Q&A with me, Danielle. I hope you are all well here on the YouTube channel. And tonight is all about answering your questions on live stream about mediumship development, all things to do with anything that you want to talk to me about. So I hope you are all well. Hi from Toronto. I hope you're well out there. I hope you're keeping okay. I've been watching you actually on Instagram. That's why I've been watching you on Instagram. I've been watching some of your work. Very good indeed. Well impressed, actually. It's very good. I would say good's the word I would use. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoy watching it. Anyway, so if you got your questions for me, by all means, pop it in the chat box. I have a couple from my students, as you all know. I always bring some in from my students. They always have plenty they want to talk about. I'll wait for the stream to sort of build a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about what we've got going on. So this Sunday coming, I have a connection to a workshop which is mediumship versus imagination. There's a couple of spaces left on that if people want to come along and sort of get involved in that one. That's 3 o'clock UK time, around about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Pacific time, maybe it's about lunchtime. Mountain time, it's early afternoon from what I take. From the Australian lot, it's the middle of the night, so I know a lot of my Australian lot don't come to that one. Because the way they don't come to them ones, because it's in the middle of the night over there, like. What else have we got going on? We've got the Clairaudience mechanics, which is running in July. So if you want to come along and join me for that one, that's understanding everything to do with how clairaudience actually works. How do you actually build the mechanics rather than practicing clairaudience and stuff like that? This is all about the mechanical work. Hi to everybody who's just saying hi. Hi to Vicky, I hope you're well. So yeah, there's that one in July. A couple of spaces have gone on that one already. We do have another option for those who maybe don't want to understand the mechanical work so much, but want to just do the practical side of things. That's tones and textures. That one is in May. You're more than welcome to come along and join that one. That's Clairaudience as well. So a lot of Clairaudience workshops coming up as requested by you lot. Spaces are limited. You're more than welcome to come along. If not, you can come along just the ordinary development classes, which is my mediumship, and get involved in them ones as well. You're more than welcome to join us if you feel it's something you're interested in. So Medium saying, thanks to you, I've got this far. I have a question about your workshop. Oh, okay. Which one, Medium? I'm pleased you say that. You know what I mean? I do my best. I try my best. You know, I'm always doing what I think is right. Wait, what the spirit world think is right. I always do what they think is right, not what I think is right. What the spirit world thinks is right. But yeah, by all means, hit me up with your workshop. I'll explain it if I can, and I'll talk to you a little bit. I still haven't gotten the lighting sorted out here. I will get round to that at some point. I've just had an absolutely manic week. Every week's a manic week these days. I wasn't sure about the difference between the Clairaudience workshop versus the tones and textures, and also getting names workshop. Do they cover the same material? No, they're all different. So tones and textures is about understanding the energy vibration in which that you get when you're getting tones and textures for names. The mechanical one, which is the Claire's mechanics, is about the understanding of the mechanics. So why is that mechanic like that? Why is that mechanic working with the mind like that? What it's more to do with the mechanical work. The other one, tones and textures, is more about understanding energy that then turns into clairaudience. The clairaudience mechanics is more about understanding the mechanics to gain the tones and textures, if that makes sense. And then the names one is completely, it covers all bases. So it covers clairaudience, it covers clairvoyance, it covers clairsentience, it covers a few different ways in which that we get names. Names don't always just come in as words or tones and textures. They do sometimes come as pictures and things. So the names workshop I do covers a variety of ways in which that we can get names, not always just built on Clairaudience, because I do appreciate and understand that not everybody's going to get them on a Clairaudience link. So hope that makes sense to you. If not, let me explain it more to you, or if you want more details, let me know about that one, and then I'll tell you whether or not I can explain that better to you. Do they cover the same material? Nah. None of my workshops, no workshop of mine is identical. They're all different in their own unique style. I never run, even when I run names, I always add a different style into that one. So every year I run a names workshop, it's different every time. Because obviously my development's learning, so you get the latest sort of information that I have from the spirit world. I use different exercises, different techniques, everything. They're always different, because what's the point of coming if you're going to learn the same thing in every class? That's just craziness, that, you know what I mean? Plus it's boring for me who's sharing knowledge. It's boring. I didn't want to do that. I was pushing my development as well as yours in the room as well. So every class is different in its own unique right. And the reason for that is because it's based from the spirit world. So we're constantly adjusting. I tend to find with my classes, this is just my class, I can't speak for other people, but I speak for me. My classes tend to be evolving around the students that are in there. So the things that we cover tend to be designed for people who are in that room, and it helps them to understand their mediumship better. I've always done my workshops like that, and I probably always will. Mine aren't sort of set in stone. They shift and alter and move for the people in the room, and they're designed for the people in which that book on that thing. So I have a couple of techniques that I use when I'm building any kind of workshop, class, course, anything like that. And mine always come from inspiration from the spirit world. I didn't give too much away about that, because that's how I do my style. But every class is unique, and it's unique to the individual who's sitting on it now. Even though it's done in a group setting, same with my mediumship stuff. Everything is uniquely designed for everybody in that room. I know you're probably thinking, well, how's that even possible? It's possible, and that's why I do small classes, because I believe in development that is unique to the individual in the room, not on the masses. Not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with the masses, so I didn't shoot me like a dog for that one. But I just feel, for me, I want the best from my students in the room, and I work, and it's not like here's a set program and this is how it's going to be, and my stuff floats with the room, so that the room continuously is evolving and growing in that way. So I hope that answers your question. Let me know if it doesn't. So one of the questions I got today I didn't actually, I got it on an email of a student, and one of the things she talked about to me was about open circles. That's what she talked to me about, open circles. Now, open circles are practice circles to each and every one of you, depending on where you are in the world. So open circles are called them here in the UK. Practice circles are, what the class are call them abroad. And her question to me was, why is it that everybody in that room looks like they're doing so well, and I look like I'm blowing smoke up my backside? And there's a couple of reasons for this, right? So I'm going to tag a little bit about this, and then obviously you can talk to me about it if you so wish. So one of the things I've learned with open circles, or any kind of practice circles, is most of them, if not all of them, 90% of people in there know each other, right? They're either out of development classes, they're out of the student classes that yous are in, and people know each other, if I could say that. All right, I'll get your question in a minute, medium. That all know each other in some way, shape or form. They've either trained with them, they're in classes with them, whatever it may be, right? You probably go into that practice circle and you don't know anybody, right? And for the student who doesn't know anybody in there, this can seem very daunting, right? Because they're all chatting away, butting on, blah, 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 whatever it may be. And for you who's going in there for the first time, you're like, well, I don't know anybody in here. I feel a bit awkward. I'm not quite sure what's going on. This feels odd, right? So as I said to the students, I'm going to say to you, that's good. When you're going to be like, look at me going, well, why would that be good, Danielle? Because then you are playing with you're playing with a clean slate, right? When you know people in circles, you see this on demonstrations of mediumship, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the problem there is they've heard readings being given to others from others in the room, X, Y, and Z. And what can happen is, and I have seen this, is the person who's giving somebody a reading can turn around and go, oh, well, I've got your dad here, even though they already know the dad's been through before. For you who's first time to that sort of circle, You don't know anybody, so you're just going with whatever it is that the spirit world give you. I always say to people, go into circles where you didn't know anybody, because it's the fastest, quickest way to get your mediumship up and on its feet, right? The other thing I want to say about this and all is that when you're the medium in there and you think you're blowing smoke up your backside, what you're actually saying to me there is that you're just trying to get ahead so that you can feel comfortable in your own development, right? So one of the things I do see sometimes with platform medium or stuff like that, mediums tend to go to people that they know, because they're not going to turn them down. They're not going to say, oh, well, I've got your dad here. Oh, yeah, me dad. But they already know their dad's in the spirit world. So I always am a little skeptical. And one thing I've done, and I will say this to you, right? Whenever I'm doing any kind of demonstration, I'm doing out like that, I always say the spirit world, didn't bring through people that I've had through before. Let's have new people through. Let's have different types of connections, links, this type of thing. If there is a possibility that someone does come through that I've read for before, I will say to the congregation, to anybody, I know this person, and I'm going to be very honest about what it is that I'm giving off, right? Because I never want somebody to turn around to me and say, oh, well, you knew that person, and you've read for them before, and you knew their dad was in the spirit world. So I'm always very, very aware, practice circles, anything like that, where you will be very cautious and careful that you're not using what you already know about somebody to give off a message, because you're fearful or worried that you may fall flat on your face. This is why I was saying it's better to go into a room where you don't know anybody at all. And so from a student who was questioning me, well, he wasn't questioning me, he was asking me a question about what it is that they should do, it is probably in your best interests as somebody who's training or learning or practicing to be in rooms like nobody knows you. So I hope that answers the question from a student, Kristen. Thank you very much for that. Medium saying, okay, I understand better now. One question is, should a medium feel energy in the throat chakra, voice box, because spirit use that area of the body? Clairaudience, thank you. So that's sort of leaning me a little bit into the world of trance. Now, trance is not channeling, right? I've had this discussion a few times. Let me tell you the difference. Channeling is where there is inspiration from the spirit world, but it's not fully done in the what we call the altered state awareness of trance, right? Channeling is where the mind has been moved to the place in which where there's clairvoyance, clairaudience, etc., 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 and it's been inspirationally given to you from the guides, but also has an element of you in it. Trance is coming from an intelligence. It's coming from a guide, or it's coming from a loved one. And you have to be in a different altered state of awareness. Trance is not done in the space in which that you do your mental mediumship. Even though it sits in the mental mediumship bracket, it's not done in the same awareness in which that you do your clairvoyance in, right? What I tend to find is mediums are developing, and as we start to understand the layers of the brain waves and the altered states more, we seem to move up and down them a lot more easier. In the early days, it's quite rigid, it's quite stiff. Fear, we talked about that last week. Them things can sort of keep the mind sort of stuck, if I could say that. As we start to develop more, the fear starts to drop, the mind starts to relax, and we feel more comfortable. What tends to happen is the spirit world will start to try doing other things. So they may start to look at trance work, they may start to look at philosophy, healing, whatever it may be. Whenever I'm ever sort of getting a bit of an issue with my throat, I have to, because I do trance, I have done trance now on and off for about the last 5 years, 6 years, I've done transport. I'm baby to that, you know what I mean? As I'm baby to development, you know, it's not something I do on a professional level. It's something that I teach, and it's something that I do for my own personal sort of gains and my own personal sort of circles, classes, stuff like that. But I wouldn't say I'm a professional trance worker. That's not the title I would put around me. If you're starting to have like things starting to brew here, what it could be is that the mind's now starting to drop into a different sort of altered awareness when you're doing your work. Now, this could be a little bit of channeling, but it could also mean there's new aspects of your development opening up. And so for me, what I would probably say to you is, if it's not coming from a communicator, or it's not coming from intelligence when you're doing a reading, it could be medium that the spirit world's starting to look at other things. They're starting to play with other aspects of your mind, and they're starting to play in different areas of your development, which when we're developing mediums, we should always be moving into different areas. We don't want to stay in the same area all the time, become a one-trick pony. That's not what you want. You want to be sort of, looking at different elements of your development. You want to be able to play in different worlds. Even if you don't use them professionally, it's very, very helpful for understanding more about what's happening with your mediumship, what's next, what could be coming in, etc., etc. So for me, when people start to say the energy's building here around the voice box and stuff, it could be that they are using that area more because there's some new development coming in, or like I say, it could be that element of channeling that you want, that they might be looking at. But again, remember, that's got human aspects to it. So you've got to understand the definition between what's spirit versus what's human. But if you're in the trance altered state and your mind is in that state, then it will always be an intelligence who's working through you. And a sort of an experience of this is cabinet work. So I don't know for many of you on here who maybe know about cabinet work or not. Cabinet work's where the medium's inside of what we call a black cabinet with like curtains on it or whatever it may be. And inside of there's ectoplasm produced. Another aspect of trance is where they'll do automatic writing. Automatic writing again comes in two areas. It can come in the channeling world, but it can also come in the trance world. Normally built through ectoplasm. The spirit world comes through the ectoplasm. I seen this about 6 years ago, before COVID. I was going down to Devon and Cornwall a lot, down to sort of that world, and I was working a lot with some different types of mediums who did this work. And what I saw there was as the spirit world would come through the ectoplasm, they would pick up crayons or chalk and they would write on little boards. Like, they weren't full words, but there were bits and pieces. That's an element of what we call automatic writing, but done through the trance channels. So the spirit world are very, very smart like that. They're very clever. Also, another thing that can be done in trance is where we have trance speaking, which is your philosophy aspects. Silver birch is a prime example of this. Red clouds, another one, is a prime example of this. My 2 books should be arriving 24th, of that ordered. Looking forward to it. Yes, Katie. Posted one today. One went off today. The other one has just been ordered. Should be here tomorrow, so I can post that off Monday. So they should be all with you by next week, sweetheart. Trance speaking is obviously your communications, but your philosophy, red cloud, silver birch are prime examples of this. Trance speaking can also be the intelligence coming through. Then you have the aspects of trance healing, that type of thing. So it sounds to me like medium, your development's on the move. That's what it sounds like to me. That doesn't really make me think that there's anything untoward going on. It makes me think more of the fact that the spirit world's on the move with your development, which is a great, great thing, to be honest with you. So I hope that explains trance a little bit more. Always remember, trance is connected to intelligence in an altered state of awareness. Channeling is human with inspiration from the spirit world. Always remember that. And if you remember that, really in my world, I always want to be playing with trance. Inspiration stuff can always be congealed and mixed up with the human mind. Human mind likes to push on, add on. Talked about this with clairvoyance and clairsentience and stuff like that. It can add on, and it's not always helpful, I've got to be honest, because then the mind's getting involved and the mind's sort of putting it that way when really it wasn't perceived that way. A prime example of that is where cloaks of protection. So many years ago, and I've actually wrote a blog about this. Cloaks of protection. I actually asked the spirit world about this. Cloaks of protection was never intended for mediumship. Never. It was never intended. The way in which it was given through the medium's mind, to which the mind then perceived it, and then the mind then, the person who took that information then pushed that out there. It was taken in the wrong context. And that's what happens sometimes when the mind's not completely in the spirit world. The mind's influencing or getting involved in some way. And what happens is the mind interprets the information that's given to spirit, and then is perceived over in a negative way or in a not so correct way, depending on the medium's mind. And I've talked about this before with medium's minds. I've always said this, that you can only be trained if you're human trained. You can only be as trained as far as that human mind will go. So if the human mind is limited in some way or it's fear-based in some way, that's as far as your development will ever go. If you're with somebody whose mind is massively open, prepared to see every side of the coin, constantly shifting, adapting and altering to fit the minds of the medium, you'll go far, 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 because your development can only go as far as the limitations in which that the human mind is training you. Honestly, like, and I always say that to people, keep that in mind. You know, the more you train by spirit, it's limitless. You've got any amount of knowledge and information as long as you're prepared to put your mind there and work with that. So for me, it's very much important when if you are going to go down the road of human training, look at the mindset of the individual. Look at how far that mind is expanding. Look at how far the fear within that individual is, because that will give you a clear indication of how far their development is, or how far their training actually succeeds, if I could say that to you. So I hope that answers a few of your questions. So another question that I got from one of my students, which is a really simple one actually, which is, how do you build a link, Danielle? So how do we build a link? Building links is actually the easiest part of mediumship, right? And you probably are looking thinking, well, how's that even possible? Like, that's probably the hardest bit. Actually not. It's actually you getting out the way that's the hardest bit. Building a link is basically getting one piece of information and joining it together. And I was with a student last night on a personal, I do personal development as well, like on a one-to-one basis. And what I tend to do is I get them to get one piece of information from the spirit world and stay there. And that's how you build links. You have your starting block. Talked about that in the channel. There's videos on it. Check it out. Some people do descriptive work. Some people start with names. Some people start with relationships. Whatever it is that floats your boat. Whatever makes your mind comfortable enough to shift it from there to there. Right? That's no issue. None whatsoever. The middle section is where we build the links. And building links is basically taking one piece of evidence and learning to push it out. So the way in which we question, I've talked about this on the channel before. I say a lot of people, which I think some people talked about this not last week, the week before, checklist. That's about as far as it goes. I tend to use a different type of technique because I feel like it's very open-ended rather than closed structured questions. Closed structured questions are going to get you a yes or no answer, or they're going to get you sort of a closed sort of question is, how did you pass? Not, can you tell me more about the way in which that you went over to the spirit world? Now, it feels a bit wordy. Granted, you can alter and shift it to, fit your mind. But what we're actually doing there is allowing the intelligence to tell the story. Intelligence is the loved one, communicator, whatever label, stick it there. And what you're then doing is you're then allowing that link to build of its own free will. And the information is coming through and you just put it together. One of the things that I think is misconstrued in this industry, and I need to talk about, I've seen this last night with a student, is the fact that you're meant to be getting every bit of information, and that's not true. It comes in sporadically as like a picture, it might come in as a word, it might come in as a feeling. It's not like I'm sitting talking to you. So let me give you an example. So this is how students think it should be versus this is how it is going to be. So I'll give you two examples. I've got Dad here, and as I'm working with Dad's making me aware that he had throat cancer. In actual ways, it comes in, Dad, throat cancer, here. That's it. You'll get 3 pieces of evidence. Your job to build the link is to put it all together and to put it into some sort of way in which that the person in front of you can understand what it is that you are talking about. Does that make sense? So for me, it's always important that when you're building a link, learn to stick with one bit of evidence. Didn't pull 50 billion, because the more evidence you've got, the more you've got to clean up. I say this a lot now with students. Pull massive amounts of evidence, but then a lot of it gets either dropped, or it can't be placed, or it gets forgotten about. Now, if you're going to pull lots of evidence like I do, you've got to be prepared to clean it all up. You cannot leave bits of evidence hanging, names hanging, whatever it may be. So it's always important, just take one piece and work with that. A lot of people say to me, how do you deepen evidence, Danielle? Well, that's very simple and all. It's not rocket science, but everybody makes it hard work. I've got to be honest. Ask more questions. Well, not ask more questions. Learn to push that intelligence out. So use more open-ended statements like, well, why would you be talking to me about that? Could you give me more on that? Would you like to explain that further to me? Or just some of the examples of open-ended use of questioning. If you want to question. A lot of mediums do question. I'm not particularly one of these mediums who need a question in the spirit world, but some of you do. So that's a way of opening up a conversation, and then just ask for an answer. That's a way of opening up. Yeah, that's exactly right, Katie. That's all you do. You just learn to build links through using open-ended questions or open-ended statements. That's probably a better question. I didn't really like the word question, right? I'll tell you why I didn't like it. Because I feel like when people say that, you question the living daylights out of somebody's loved one. And you didn't want to be digging that. You know, if you were sitting down with your mom or dad or whatever, whoever it may be, the last thing you want to be doing is asking them 50 billion questions. What you do is you say, oh, how was your day? They'll then sit and tell you all about the day, what went on, you know, this, that, the t'other, whatever it may be. Not, well, how was your day, what have you been up to, where have you been, who have you been with, you know, 50 billion questions. You just ask one question and let the communicator do the job. And that's how you build a link. And by building a link, you then get bits of information, put it together and present it to the client. And one of the things I see a lot of with students, there's no filling in the gap. So, for example, when I said, I've got dad here, and as I'm being shown dad, and as I'm working with dad, he's making me aware of throat cancer. The only 3 pieces of evidence in there is dad and the throat cancer. That's it, we actually 2. The rest of it, I've like sort of filled in the blanks and built round it so that the evidence slots inside of it. A lot of mediums get throat cancer and then wait, and what they do is then fear kicks in, pushes the mind out, so the mind comes out the spirit world into the awareness, bit more fear, and out onto the psychic link, and it's all over. So what you've got to learn to do is learn to put your work into a set of what we call statements so that the client in front of you can understand what it is that you're talking about. And that is the easiest way to build a link and also the easiest way to deepen evidence. People are like, well, how do you get so much depth in your work, Danielle? I've learned to allow my mind to be as open as possible so that any information that they want to get in is available to them and available to me. Kate is correct. It helps to establish a relationship that way. That's exactly right. The more you build a relationship, and I've talked about this on the channel, and people probably think, oh, like, you know, it's boring doing that. The biggest thing with your development is to have some kind of relationship with the spirit world. You know, if you're going in there asking 50 billion questions and not listening to anything that's been said, not one thing, that's all you're going to get. A simple answered questions. If you learn to sit and listen to the intelligence and listen to what they're talking to you about and just stick with, see, a lot of mediums panic and think, oh, well, I've only got 1 piece of evidence. 1 piece of evidence, all you want. If it's a good piece of evidence. So, for example, the throat cancer, we'll use this as an example, right? The throat cancer's got a start, a middle, and an end. Start's going to get you, so your intro, all mediums should be introducing themselves. You don't go straight into a reading. You introduce yourself, you explain what it is that's going on, you ask the client for what you need, yes, no, don't know. That's all you should be needing in evidential mediumship. If you've got telling you half the life story, you're wasting your time. It's as simple as that, right? So that takes you about a minute or 2, right? You want the client to feel comfortable in front of you. You know, if you're doing them from home, I do this. You want a cup of tea? Do you want a cup of coffee? You know, it's all about making the client comfortable, right? Because the more that client's comfortable, the better it's going to work for you in the spirit world, right? If they're not on board, you're going to struggle to get these 2 things to line up, right? Then you start with your starting block and you sort of get yourself in there. It's going to take another 2 to 3 minutes, right? We're already 5 minutes in, okay? From there, you then get 1 piece of evidence. You should be able to push that piece of evidence out for 5 to 10 minutes. Right? So throat cancer, it's got to start. So it started in June, and it was me dad wasn't himself, and he sort of started to like get this bit of a in his throat, you know, and it starts to tell the story of the throat cancer. As we get a little bit in, we now start to get to the middle part of that story where we're talking about how he ended up having to be in hospice and he had to do this and he had to do that and blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, you talk about how it is that he passed, how he did this, how he did that, what he did, blah, 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 blah. There's 15, 20 minutes. It's time to wrap up and get out. Most readings are only 25 minutes, half an hour push. If you then do 45 minutes to an hour, you're then going to be heading out onto a psychic link. You're going to be doing the psychic work for them. Never mix psychic and mediumship. The two, one and the same. If you're going to do that work, always do your mediumship first, then do the psychic work, hours, because it stops you mixing and matching and moving the mind between this and this. You're better off going straight to the spirit world, doing that work first, and dropping down into the psychic. If you think about it straight, so if you think about it straight and then into the awareness, then drop down. It's the best way to go about doing any kinds of readings. Never do the psychic work first, because there's always a challenge that you haven't moved your mind enough to the spirit world, so you're better off going to the spirit world first. It makes more logical sense to do it that way. So when everybody says to me, and then what you do within that reading is at first it's going to feel quite general, you know what I mean? But over time, what will happen is you'll start to add more work in. You'll start to add more bits of evidence in there, what I call chunky piece of evidence. So you might get that there's 2 daughters, or you might get a few names, or whatever it may be. And over time, you learn to listen to that intelligence. You don't need to ask 50 billion questions. You just need to ask one, and learn to follow that story to the best of its ability. So I hope that helps people understand a little bit more about deepening work, but also how to build, from a student, how to build links as well, because building links is just about following the story. It's not about you inserting yourself into that story. It's about you learning to listen to that story, follow it, and learning to pick up what's on that link. In your last YouTube video, you have mentioned that sometimes mediumship for you is better when you're not fully feeling 100%. I wonder if that could be elaborated on a bit more. Yeah. So, I've been demonstrating in private sitting now for our 12 year, right? And I've read for thousands. I've demonstrated in front of hundreds. You know, I've done my fair share of this. I've got to be honest, right? And I tend to find that for me, and this is just me personally, I tend to find that when I'm tired, my conscious mind isn't putting up the fight. My conscious mind's just like, oh, here, look, whatever. Like, well, get cracking, get it on with it, get done, right? So the conscious mind isn't fighting me. Same when I'm sick. When I'm not well, the conscious mind's too busy watching the body. It's too busy fighting over there, cold, you know, whatever, sickness bug, whatever it is I've got going on. It's not really interested in what I'm doing for the spirit world. And it's the same when I'm tired. When you're tired, the conscious mind's more interested in looking after the human aspects of me, not so much putting up the barrier between me and the spirit world. Not that there is a barrier, but my mind just it slips over there anyway, but there is no fight, you know what I mean, when I'm sick or I'm tired or whatever it may be. And it's just because the conscious mind, which is the human aspects of Danielle, isn't really putting a fight up with the medium Danielle, if I could say that to you. I also tend to find it's not you're not bothered, that's not the word I want to use. But what I would say is that because you're tired, because you're not well, as you all know, you can't really be bothered, right? So you just sort of get the evidence, work it, and give it off. Does that make sense? Sometimes when we're really flying on full cylinders, as I call them, or high flying discs or whatever, the human mind likes to get involved, or it wants to sort of, I don't know, how some kinks in, or wants to overanalyze it, or wants to sort of get involved. When it's tired or it's not well or whatever, the human mind's like sort of like whatever, just whatever, whatever. So I tend to find for me, the mind seems to work a lot better when I'm tired, or when, you know, I'm not well, or I've done about 3 or 4 dems, because I used to do 3 or 4 dems a week at one time. I don't now. I do maybe 2, 3 a month now. I don't dem nowhere near as much as I used to. I used to dem every other day, you know, when I first started out, but now not so much because I'm busy with other things. So I used to tend to find that, you know, by the 4th dem, I was shattered. I was tired, you know what I mean? So I would just get up on the rostrum and it would just, like, it flows in anyway, but there was just no resistance to it at that point, because the human mind was just like, oh, whatever, like, whatever you're doing, just do, because I'm not going to put a fight up. Does that make sense? I sometimes find that when your mind's really in a good place and it's flying on them full cylinders, as I say, it wants to get involved. It really does. I've got to be honest with you on that one. So I hope that explains. If it doesn't explain for your medium, let me know. I'll give you a bit more. I think you had also mentioned that psychic work can take your energy and mediumship work doesn't take away energy. Yeah. So when you do mediumship, you shouldn't come away from a dam or a private sitting and feel flat. If you feel flat after doing any kind of dam or any kind of reading, I always then have to question, has there been some kind of psychic work presented there? Psychic work drains the human aspect of us. Remember, because when we do spirit, all spirit is power to the awareness. Intention to the awareness pushes over to the spiritual aspects of us, to where we do the spirit work. When we're doing psychic work, it's all coming off that right side. So it's also, the right side is part of the aspects of the drive, the ambition, the motivation in us. Left side is all about creativity, intuition, natural flow, spiritual connections. So if you're doing a lot of psychic work, you're draining that aspect of you. So you're draining the human aspects of you that motivate you, do your work. So I'm always very aware that if, you know, students say to me, oh, I did a lot of readings yesterday and I feel absolutely flat as a pancake today, Danielle, I have to ask myself, how much of this actual human energy have you been using, if that makes sense? Because the more you're using this, you're draining that human aspect of you. If you're working for spirit, your mind's in the spirit world. Now, while you are holding the connection, they're doing 90% of the work. This is what people don't realize with the spirit world. You think you're DNA a graft, but you're not. It's them. They're pushing the information through. They're touching the mind. They're looking at the point references. They're building all of that information. All you're doing is just putting... I'll come back to that in a minute, Katie. The left side, you're just holding the connection. The spirit world's just dropping everything else in, and it's your job to put that into a sentence. That's it. A lot of mediums want to dig it out. They want to power the connection. They want to know what they're talking about, and they also want to control the spirit world as well. Different. Learn to just push the energy, push the mind to here, put the intention in, push the mind, and learn to hold. That's all you got to do. Do nothing else. Learn to let the link build, put it into a sentence, give it off. Learn it. It's what I call a flow. It flows like silk. I've talked about this for years. I mean, early lives, I talked about this massively. It's flow. You just let it run as it needs to. What mediums do is they like start to insert and start asking questions. What's your name? What do you pass with? What do you do this? You different. Learn to let the intelligence do the work. That's what they're doing. When they do the work, you find the work flows of its own free will. You don't need to be in control of it. This is what I'm talking about. See, when mediums are in control or want to be in control, and the human aspects of them is tired or sick or not well, they just let go and let them do the job. That's where a lot of mediums gone wrong. What happens is they don't let the spirit world do the job in which that they're meant to be doing. They don't allow the spirit world to present what they want to present, because a lot of mediums are being trained to search for evidence. You didn't need to actually search for any evidence, because all you've got to do is learn to build the mechanics, which goes back to medium's question about the Clairaudience class. When you build the mechanics become part of the point reference or the database. I talked about this in freestyling. What you're doing is you're just putting the mechanical work in so that the spirit world can touch upon that and then give it to you through your mind without the mind having to fight you in any way. But what a lot of mediums do is search for information or search for evidence or do this. You don't actually have to search for anything if you learn to build the mechanical base that's necessary for you to get that information over. You know, I'll give you an example. One of the examples I say, memories. Loads of mediums get memories. In fact, 90% of you are all work memory based, right? Let me just have a drink of this tea. What you do is you haven't built the mechanical work enough to explore that memory. So, as I was just talking about earlier on with the intelligence, right? When you're building a link and you get one piece of evidence. So, here's an example. You go into a hospital room, you share the memory. So the spirit world, this dad's giving you a memory in the middle of his link, right? And you're in the hospital with a hospice. It wasn't a hospital, it was a hospice, right? And in there is all the information you need. Names, dates, times, descriptive work, all that type of thing. But most of yous don't even remotely work in that space. Oh, I can just say your daddy was in a hospice. Yes, that's correct. But what you don't do is then build the mechanical work to get more database information. Or you don't have the mechanical work that you've trained the mind to look for more information. So what I mean by that is so for example, if I was to be presented that, I wouldn't just take, oh, he was in hospice. I would want to know what hospital he was in, what road it was on. And over time, what I've done is built a mechanical base set that basically, as soon as a memory like that shared with my mind, my mind automatically just pulls that information from that memory. That's all it does. I don't go looking for it because in the early days I taught my mind to be able to access that information. So it naturally just floods in now. So I don't actually have to do any work because I've built the mechanics that's necessary in order to be able to gain that information. And that's where everybody's gone wrong. And instead what mediums do is get in there and start asking loads of questions. Instead what you should have done is built the mechanical work that would allow you for that information to naturally flood in. If that makes sense to you. So I hope that helps you out there with that one. But yeah, if you're tired after doing demonstrations and mediumship work, and I have to ask myself the question, were you working psychically or were you working mediumship? Because even though they're not powering you, they're actually doing 90% of the work. The only thing you're doing is holding the connection. And if you're holding the spirit world, it shouldn't feel hard. It should just feel natural. It shouldn't feel like you're having to push for it. It should just be there. It's just like there. It's like it's just this is working, this is flowing, there's no problems here. If it feels like you're pushing and pulling and riving and this, that and the other, you have to start asking the question, is something wrong here? Because it shouldn't be like that. Casey, maybe we aren't so much in our distracted mind chatter when tired. That's exactly right, Katie. We're not in that, what I call that human aspect of you. That human aspect's not playing. It's basically our there snoozing. And a lot of mediums talk about this, where you want less interference with the medium, with the human mind, and more of spirit, which is correct. That's exactly what we want. 90% spirit, 10% human. You know, 10% of human is you holding the connection, empowering the connection. That's it. The rest of it should be 90% of the spirit world. The right side of the brain does the work versus spirit does the work and communication. The right side of the brain is just pushing that sort of energy to the awareness to move it over to the left hand side in order so that we can work more closely with the spirit world, if that makes sense. So yeah, so for me it's all about looking at how you're doing your work. Have you got the mechanical base set up? Have you got enough, like, sort of when we talk about the point reference or the database? So what I've done over the years with the spirit world is I've gained mechanics so that when they touch a certain part of my mind or a memory or whatever, that mechanic just kicks straight in, just clicks in, and it just works. You know, and I think for me, I think what we're going about development in the sort of the wrong way, if I could say that to you. I'm not saying my way is the right way. I'm just saying that people are making development really hard, and it doesn't need to be this hard. Like, it really doesn't. I was starting to get names of mediumship, and I didn't understand how I was doing them until you explained it to me. Morse code method that helped me understand a bit more. Yeah. So, you know, the Morse code method is again just sort of, any tips on how to finely tune the method, because sometimes it gets part of the name only. Yeah, because what you've got to understand with names is, names come in a multitude of ways. They come in through clairaudience, so the Morse code method. They may also come in through a picture. They may also come in through a feeling. So some of the words you may get on the Morse code method, but you may need a bit more to back it up. So you might need a feeling to back it up. You may need a picture to back it up. With mediumship, and this is a cue, this is something I always look for. If you're working for the spirit, you should have a picture with a feeling behind it or something else. Word should have a feeling or something to back it up with. So for me, I know you're saying finely tune it, look at maybe bringing in other aspects of your development to back it up, because the clairaudience may not be just enough to get it where you need it to be. So you need a bit of a feeling, or you need a bit of a knowing, or you need just something like that, just to finish it off, if I could say that to you. Or you need a picture. Pictures can be a multitude of different things when it comes to names. I've seen it done in lots of different ways. You know, for me personally, when I'm doing any kind of dem and I'm doing private sittings, the names are wrote above their heads in gold writing, and that's gone on ever since I did my mediumship. It's always been like that. But saying that, Sometimes some of the letters are a lot more clearer than others. So, and then sometimes I'll get a word. So I'll see some of the letters. So I don't know, I might see a C and an A and an E. And then I'll hear Claire. Does that make sense? So I see some of the letters, but then the name is then backed up from a word in the spirit world. So it's about understanding that with when you're doing clairaudience as a picture, right, clairvoyantly, you have to appreciate that you're going to have a bit more to fill it in. The same with clairaudience. You may sometimes get that word clear as a bell with the Morse code, but other times you may need a little bit more just to finish it off. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the way the tones and textures of the Morse code energy is working. You know, so for me, it's about learning to understand that you may just need a little bit more to finish that off. So what I always say to people is when you get names, whichever way you get them, you know, you have to first work out exactly which way they're coming. Then you need to be able to understand the mechanics behind the back of it, and then also understand how it may need to be adjusted or shifted for certain names or certain awarenesses or different types of sitters as well. Also plays a part there as well. You know, names is for me is an easy thing, but not for everybody, and I do appreciate that. And not everybody's going to get them on a clairaudience link. Some of them get them on clairvoyance and stuff like that. It all depends on the mind, the mechanics, what's already in there, the database, etc, etc, etc. I hope that helps you out there, medium. I hope that sort of explains a little bit more for you there, and I hope that sort of gives you a bit more of an insight. I would say to people, and this is just something, and this is where my development and my books come from, and I know this through years and years, and I've still got stuff downstairs, and I think I've talked about in the channel before, is writing information, right? You know, for every reading I did in the first couple of years, I wrote it all down. I used to sit with a pen and paper in front of us and I would give the clients, and I used to keep a tally of what information was coming through and how it was coming through. You know, the fastest and quickest way to understand your development is to understand the way in which the information's coming in. The more you understand the way the information's coming in, the quicker you're going to understand your development. The quicker you understand your development, the quicker you know how to build on it. If you can't tell me how something's coming in, then how do you expect to build on it? If you can't tell me, you know, how you're gaining your information or your link, then how are you ever meant to progress in that area? Does that all make sense, everybody? You know, if you're just expecting it to turn up randomly, which, you know, a lot of information does, but is it coming in through a picture? Is it coming in through a word? Is it a known? Is it a feeling? Because once you start to understand, if you've got 90% of your work coming in on a known, then the majority of your work is coming in that way. If you've got half pictures, half words, half this, then you've then got a good understanding of how the mechanical base is working with the spirit world. You know, it's about your own personal self-development here. You know, and a lot of mediums can't even tell me how they're getting a communicator. Can't tell me which way the communicator's coming in. Can't tell me how that information's being presented to them. They can't tell me whether or not it's psychic versus mediumistic. You know, all that has to be monitored. If you want to be an excellent medium, you have to understand your own development. You can't rely on others to tell you about that development. You've got to understand it for yourself. And the fastest way, and do you also know that by, inside of my books, that was why my books were developed like this, by writing it, what you're actually saying to the spirit world is I get that. I understand that. Bring more in that way. What you're saying to the spirit world is they know. Like, for example, I see this a lot with students. Students is like, I'm not getting any more information, Danielle. Do you know why? Because you haven't given off what you've already got in there. So therefore, you've got nowhere to go. You either have to speak it or you have to write it. That's how energy works. If you're not writing it or you're not speaking it, it just goes round and round and round and round. But a lot of people won't give off what they've got because they're fearful. But what they don't realise is that when you give it off, you get more. You know, so you have to understand them aspects as well, because otherwise the information's not going anywhere. And then when they get feedback from the sitter, I got that, I had that, and I didn't give it off. And that's what happens, you see, because they won't give it off. So therefore, no more information comes, or the link dies, or it starts to jolt and shift because they can't give off because they don't have enough belief in the fact that that information's there. Instead, what you got to do is learn to say it regardlessly, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. Say it. And so for me, I think it's important to always remember that whenever you're getting your work, you need to be understanding of how your work's coming in. Because if you don't understand it, it's just coming any hard way, then however you're meant to develop on that, if you can appreciate that. How do you quickly establish a connection one after the other? How do I? Years of practice, that, Neil. Years of practice, I've got to be honest. Mine just move. There's a couple of techniques I used very early on in the early days, especially when I did platform, and I relied heavily on the spirit world for this one. All right. I had a couple of different mechanics in. Some of them were structural based in the early days because I was still trying to understand my platform work then. And as time's gone on, my work's become more natural at understanding. But a lot of it comes from the guides that I work with. They drop them in and feel when that energy's starting to empty, and they push them out and push the next one in. Because I haven't got time to tell everybody to step back and move forward. I see in private sittings I can afford to do that. Platform work, I can't. And the guides tend to do 90% of that work, I've got to be honest. Guides, the idea of guides, and it fumes me this, because there's so little understanding of what guides actually do over there, right? There's the idea that guides are protecting people, and that's why the cow doorkeepers, the cow this, the cow... What a load of absolute codswallop, right? It is. It's absolute load of codswallop. Guides are there to do what I've just talked about. They're to monitor communications, monitor trance work, monitor people moving in and out the mind when we're doing communications. Guides are there to make sure all our loved ones come back. Guides are there to make sure that you're developing and that you're progressing forward and you're moving forward, because they're learning as you're learning. So for me, mine was very much guide related. I'm very intentional about what I want when I'm on platform. I'm very intentional about what I want in me sitting work. I'm very intentional about how it is that things are set up, because when we're doing platform work, it's important that we get not around as many people, but we certainly do as much as we can for the spirit world in such a short space of time. So for me, I'm very, very sure of what it is that I want. I was very sure in the early days about what I wanted. And I think that's something else I need to say to people with your development. Get clear about what you want. What are you doing? Are you doing communications? If so, then what kind of communications are you wanting? What kind of work do you want to see in your work? What are you striving for? What are you looking to improve on? What would you like to see within that work? Because when you become more clear about what it is that you're trying to accomplish with your communicational work, you'll find that your work starts to naturally become better. If you're just taking any odd random piece of evidence, and that's all you're ever going to get, random. I remember seeing the spirit world very early on with the little grey-haired grannies and all the rest of it, right? Stop sending me that. I need to improve this evidence, and evidence needs to be better, because spirit will only present what it is that you keep accepting. If you then start to get cleaned up, understand your development, and understand what you're trying to do, they're then going to start adjusting and shifting, because you're not going to take that anymore. I don't do any descriptive work at all, none. Anybody who watches me is being to watch me. My work's out there for people to see, and it's been out there for many years. There's no descriptive work on my work. I don't start off with the little grey-haired granny, this, that, the other, and I haven't done for many, many years, because I said to the spirit world, that's not what I'm interested in. Let's have something better. As evidential mediums, we should be building mechanical-based stuff that pushes you to be the most authentic and best for them, if that makes sense. So I hope that answers your question a little bit there for you, Neil. Yes, it makes a lot of sense, because sometimes I get numbers, and when I ask to go deep, I can sense it's a birthday. There you go. Because that's what you're doing there is you've already built the mechanic. You haven't. Sometimes when I get a number and I ask to go deeper, what you've actually done is already built the mechanic on a sense that it's a birthday or it's a passing. You've taught the mind through mechanics to look for more. And that's what you should be doing. With any development, having a birthday, having a number is great. But what does the number mean? And your job is to build the mechanic through your work, through your practice, through understanding your development, to get more. The more we can get, but we don't want to be asking the questions for it. You'll sense it. You'll be like sensing, oh, I've got the number 27 and I know this is for a birthday, because the mechanic's already been built. Your mind's been attuned to look and explore earlier on in your development that naturally you go there and you naturally get the information that's needed to clarify that more. That's what any medium should be doing. Not just presenting a number and leave it hanging. You need to then build the mechanic inside of your mind so that when a next number comes through, we want to be looking, right, is this so it senses, is it a birthday, is it an anniversary, is it this, is it that? And then the mind automatically just does it for you. You're not actually having to ask questions anymore. If you're still having to ask billions of questions, you haven't built enough mechanical base, because the mind will naturally do it for you over time. That's what the years of development's about. It's about naturally building the mechanical base that naturally allows you, the mind, to naturally give you the information without you actually having to explore for it. So it keeps you on track, listening to the intelligence and giving off the story. It's really that simple. But a lot of people are making it complicated because they're not understanding their development, understand how things are coming in. They're not understanding the way the communicators come in. They're not pushing the mind over enough. So there's all these sort of issues that haven't been addressed because a lot of people are being trained here and here. They're not actually pushing the mind over to the spirit world, or if they are, they're dropping straight back out. They're not learning to hold the connection. You know, a lot of people hold the connection, let go and drop away. You've got to learn to hold that connection, and I've got sitting in the power techniques on here and everything for that. You know, there's nothing on this channel that I haven't given you that couldn't help you get further on within your development. And I have said this before, if you're struggling to find videos or whatever, we have a contact form on the website. Me or the girls, you know, I have people who work for me, I'll certainly pull them videos and send them to you. No questions asked, you know what I mean? I know there's a lot of information on the channel, and if you're prepared to put the work in, you're prepared to get the results. I've said this before, if you work for Spirit and you give 10%, they'll give 100%. That's how they work, because they are doing the lion's share of the work. I think Spirit get a bad rap from people blaming the spirit world, to the spirit world's, you know, not doing this or not doing that, or the communicators not working with me or whatever. Actually, the communicators are always working with you. Hours. It's you as the medium who hasn't developed the mind enough, or the mechanical mind enough, in order to pick that communicator up. It's as simple as that. You know, I see the spirit world get a bad rap. Oh, I can't. You know, I've seen it just this week, to be honest. I had somebody inbox me, Danielle, can you explain to me why it is my mum didn't come through when I went for a private sin? Oh, okay. And, you know, is there a particular, you know, is there any reason as to why? Blah, blah, blah. No. And it's because the person wasn't fully developed. And that's why the mum didn't get through. They talked about the person in front of them, so they're going to speak to the mother, and this person was talking about them and the life and blah blah blah. But actually, we're there for the mum, and the mum never come through, and that's because the medium hadn't moved the mind enough, wasn't connected to the spirit world, and ended up being out in a psychic link and talking all about the person in front of them. If that or even remotely makes sense to you at all. So I think a lot of the spirit world's getting a really bad rap. But actually, it's more to do with the individuals, and they don't understand their own development. They don't even know whether they're in the spirit world or not. And that's kind of scary, like, actually, when you think about it. You know, because you've got people saying that they're working for the spirit world. Yeah, not in audio form, just in digital. The last two went to Katie, the paperback. I have no more other than that. So, yeah, like, that sort of... For me, it's quite daunting, because people are going in for readings and they're not getting the loved ones through. And then I hear the medium say this, cracks me up, this. Oh, they're being healed in the spirit world, and they're in the hospital, and they're in this and they're in that. Now I'm just like looking around thinking, not this again. Not this again. Please, not this again. Because they're going to take accountability for the fact that they haven't improved their own development. And then blame the spirit world for it. I say it all the time. Oh, they just need more time. I've proven that, and as I know many mediums in the industry, we've had people through in less than 24 hours. 8 hours. I've seen it. I've seen mediums do it. I've done it myself. Time has absolutely no bearing here whatsoever. So people don't need to be healed. People don't need 6 months. People don't need this. That is just a medium blaming somebody, blaming the spirit world because you haven't improved your own development. And that there gets my back up, like, I've got to be honest, because the spirit world gets too much of a bad rap, and because nobody's there to stick up for the spirit world, or nobody's there shouting for the spirit world, people get away with it and make it that it's them. Oh, your mother didn't come through because she didn't fancy coming through. What a load of absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Your mum hasn't come through because, you know, her soul's broken. There's nothing wrong with the soul. Done videos on that. Check them out on the channel. Absolutely nothing wrong with the soul whatsoever. None. The soul is perfect in every way. The only aspects of the individual is the human. And the human is because of DNA, skin, mechanics, you know, electrics, all that type of thing. Has absolutely nothing to do with the soul whatsoever. The soul's perfect in every way. You know, the only thing within the soul is the memories or the information in which that is necessary to do communications with. It really is that simple. Like, it's massively overcomplicated, and it doesn't need to be this complicated. And I strive every day to make mediumship simple. It's easy. It's meant to be easy. It's not meant to be hard. It's one of the most natural things in the world, yet it's so heavily confused, and lots of really poor information out there, which I feel for the general public, because you know, people are just wanting to talk to their loved ones, and it just doesn't happen, you know. So I hope that helps with you. So that's an hour. So it's tea time for me. 8 o'clock's tea time. Especially when I've been at work since 1. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are in the world. Check us out on Facebook. You've got the website if you're looking for classes and courses, books and stuff. I'll be back next Friday as always for a chit chat. Make sure you come with your questions and stuff. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you for your questions and your comments. I do appreciate it. Check us out on Instagram as well. We are over there as well. I look forward to seeing you all next Friday. All right. Have a beautiful weekend, and I'll catch up with you all very, very soon. All right. Bye for now.